from members of the family, drawn by 6 horses, come down this road. Just the horses of the King's troop and the bearers who will carry the coffin when it reaches Westminster Abbey. Very silent now. Outside Westminster Abbey, the first members of the congregation, all of them invited guests, are arriving at the entrance to the Abbey. The doors of the Abbey won't open until 9:30. But at 9:05, the first early arrivals. Many of the congregation of 2,000 or so, people who worked for charities, people who were friends of the family, many visitors from the United States, where the princess had many friends. And this whole crowd, over 1 million strong, waiting for the moment which can now only be a few seconds away, when the princess's body is seen for the first time at the start of this funeral procession. The huge, towering building of Kensington Palace there, which looms over the west side of Hyde Park. And this, the private Palace Avenue, walled on both sides, that leads straight up to the palace itself, where the princess had her apartments, along with other members of the royal family. Princess Margaret lives there, and the Duke and Duchess of Gloucester, and the Duke and Duchess of Kent. And her sister, Lady Jane Fellowes, the wife of the private secretary to the Queen, Sir Robert Fellowes, also has an apartment in this huge palace. And it was here that Queen Victoria was born. And now the 6 horses of the King's troop come into sight, pulling the gun carriage. and they're coming out of the private entrance of the palace towards the gates that stand at the bottom. You can just see the scarlet of the 6 guardsmen who will be carrying the coffin, and the 4 other guardsmen who make up the bearer party of the Welsh Guards. Three horses at the front of this cortege. The lead driver and the sergeant commanding. And then 2 pairs of horses behind them. Led by mounted members of the Metropolitan Police in the front. coffin with the royal standard and 3 wreaths of white lilies. One from her brother Charles Spencer, the other 2 from the 2 princes, her sons, Prince William and Prince Harry. And the crowds, as she came round the corner there, not silent, bless you, shouts, and throwing flowers towards the coffin. On each side of the coffin, the guardsmen of the Welsh Guards from the Prince of Wales Company, who've been brought here from security patrols in South Armagh, have been stationed in Crossmaglen for the last 6 months. And the tall figure at the back, their commanding officer, the adjutant of the 1st Battalion, Captain Richard Williams, himself a hero who was taken hostage by the Khmer Rouge in Cambodia in 1993 and won the military cross for protecting 100 civilians during the time he was there. And they are the only military presence, the Welsh Guards and the soldiers of the King's Troop of the Royal Horse Artillery. In a moment, the procession, which is coming down Kensington Road towards Kensington Gore, will turn to the left into Hyde Park and go along South Carriage Drive at the bottom end of the park. every minute as this cortege makes its way to Westminster Abbey, a single bell at the Abbey chimes to mark its progress. The royal standard over the coffin, fringed with a deep fringe of ermine, with the 3 wreaths of lilies from her brother and her 2 sons on the top. The crowd here appears to block off the rest of the road that leads down towards the Albert Hall, and this is the point at which the funeral cortege will turn through Queen's Gate and into Hyde Park itself. cortege moving at a slow walk along the south side of Hyde Park. It came in through Queen's Gate. It's now coming up towards Alexandra Gate, heading eastwards, parallel with Rotten Row, where the Princess herself used often to ride, on its way up to Hyde Park Corner. The Albert Hall in the background there, where she herself went quite recently to hear Pavarotti sing for one of her favorite charities, draped in black. It was here in Hyde Park too that she listened in the pouring rain to that famous concert of the Three Tenors with Pavarotti. And a huge crowd, 20 deep or more, is lining the route at this point. The gates of the Abbey here at Westminster are just opening, and the first members of the congregation filing in through the west door. During the past week, they've been finding the Princess's friends, people who were known to her through her work, and contacting them and asking them if they could come here today. But it's the millions others that are lining the route that perhaps are the real congregation for these events. People who've come from right across the United Kingdom, some of whom have been here most of the week to mark the moment. She goes through Coalbrookdale Gate, Coalbrookdale being one of the gates that divides the South Carriage Drive. We're looking down now into South Carriage Drive with that little pavilion on the left that guards one of the gates that allow the public through into the park. Crowds on each side now silent as the cortege passes. The gate is passing the Prince of Wales gate. The procession is now about halfway along Hyde Park on its way to Hyde Park Corner. See the gun below the coffin there, because this is of course a proper gun carriage used for the ceremonial events that the King's troop take part in. It was Queen Victoria who was the first monarch to be given a funeral of this kind using a gun carriage, and since then Edward VII and George V and George VI and Sir Winston Churchill and the Duke of Windsor and Earl Mountbatten of Burma have all had their coffins carried in this way through the streets of London. But never a funeral procession followed by so many hundreds of thousands of people. Not just those lining the route, but the people behind, following to see if they can catch up with the procession later on. A few flowers being thrown at the leading horse there. The horses were specially trained during the past week, having flowers thrown at them so that if this did happen during the procession, they wouldn't become alarmed. So you don't need to worry for the horses. They've been trained for this moment and for the tributes that are being paid. Moments of private grief along the route of the procession as the public mourns the princess, and as the procession goes up Hyde Park here at Westminster Abbey. The congregation for the funeral service itself continues to arrive here. And for the service, the special service that's been arranged today, Tom Fleming is inside the Abbey.
This old Abbey has witnessed a rich share of this nation's history.
Here, Tom Fleming at the moment, but inside the Abbey, the crystal chandeliers lit and the congregation assembling as the funeral cortege, which has another 1¼ hours to travel before it reaches Westminster Abbey, continues on its journey along the bottom end of Hyde Park. Rain Spencer, the stepmother of the Princess of Wales, arriving at the west door of the Abbey. Now the Comtesse de Chabrun, pausing to look at the flowers outside.
Prime Ministers, ex-Prime Ministers, Archbishops, all arriving side by side. This old Abbey here has witnessed a rich share of this nation's history in the making. Great scenes of splendor and rejoicing, moments of heartbreaking remembrance. Beginnings and endings have both been marked in a building familiar to every visitor to Britain from far across the world. Today, the Abbey will be the setting for something quite unique. It will become, for a brief hour, at 11 o'clock, the focus of a whole people's remarkable outpouring of love and grief. But it will become, too, a place where that grief is transformed to thanksgiving for the life of a young woman that the whole world took to its heart. A place where a most unusual blend of words and music will turn our week-long sadness to hope and point to the future, as well as letting us take our tender farewell of someone who loved life and people and was a devoted mother to the boy who, one day, may be crowned king here in Westminster Abbey.
Outside the west door, more arrivals. A group of Chelsea pensioners there. There's going to be a wide range of people, most of them drawn from friends from public life, that's to say people she met in her work, and then close members of the family. People from the arts world, from the world of fashion, from the world of music. All those things that lifted her spirits. And summoned here very much at the last minute, and her brother there, Earl Spencer, Charles Spencer, who's arranged the family side of this service and who'll be giving the memorial address in the Abbey, escorted by one policeman, driving down the Mall on his way to the Abbey. And there are members of the media coming, as well as of the music world. And
the service for which this congregation is arriving this morning will of the traditional with the modern. It blows apart some of the artificial barriers that tend to exist in the ecclesiastical way of thinking. There will be the essential elements of a Church of England funeral service. There will be the familiar scripture sentences sung by the choir, the prayers led by the Archbishop of Canterbury, the words of commendation spoken by the Dean. But there will also be poems read by Diana's two sisters, a tribute by her younger brother, Earl Spencer, and he's proved himself in recent days to be someone who says exactly what he thinks. Verdi, sung by the BBC singers, and Lynn Dawson, the most talented young British soprano who's flown in from Berlin especially to be here. A popular song from Elton John, touchingly rewritten in the last few days, especially for this occasion. An incredibly moving piece by John Taverner, a song for Athene, written originally 4 years ago for a young girl he heard reading Shakespeare here in the Abbey, a girl killed soon after in a cycling accident. It incorporates the words of William Shakespeare's epilogue to Hamlet and the words of the Orthodox funeral service. This will be a service put together in 48 hours. No one asked to participate said no, whatever the logistical problems. The sub-organists, the lay clerks and choristers have all volunteered to come back from their summer vacation. Some have had to fly back thousands of miles to get here. So this family funeral in the inevitably royal setting of the Abbey will itself be a fitting tribute from a lot of different people of different backgrounds and different ages to the esteem and love in which this young woman, Diana, Princess of Wales, was held.
The cortege with the royal standard still on its way down South Carriage Drive through the thick ranks of mourners at the south side of Hyde Park. The standard with the lilies on it and the fringe of ermine, heraldic ermine that is, a piece of linen sewn onto the royal standard with crosses on it to distinguish it from a normal standard. And inside the Abbey, still more guests arriving. There's Richard Branson, a close friend of the Princess, who's been talking publicly about her during the week. We saw earlier Baroness Thatcher. We saw a brief glimpse of William Hague, the new leader of the Conservative Party. Paddy Ashdown and his wife, the leader of the Liberal Democrats. The leaders of the main parties were asked on the basis that those who went to the cenotaph service in November would be here and not others. a state funeral of the kind we're accustomed to would have far more people in uniform than we have here. Just one or two people you see in uniform, but they're as private guests. But most of the people culled from a wide range. Robert Runcie, the Archbishop of Canterbury, coming in, who married them in St. Paul's, the Princess and the Prince of Wales 16 years ago, and will be taking part in this service today, reading some of the prayers. Virginia Bottomley behind, the former Secretary of State for Health. The Cabinet Secretary, Sir Robin Butler, the tall figure with the grey hair, coming in. And Bill Deeds there, just a brief glimpse. Robin Cook, the Foreign Secretary, and William Hague on his right, leader of the Conservative Party. Bill Deeds, with whom she did so much work for mines recent months. And the charity workers are already assembling now, waiting to join the procession. John Prescott, the deputy leader of the Labour Party. Sir Edward Heath, the stooping figure there, just disappearing through the door of the gateway. When I say these names, it sounds as though this is a state funeral in the old sense, but of course these are the faces that we know. Many of the people among them are people who are just private friends of the Princess, or people who worked in her charities. But among them these distinguished figures, Lord Callaghan, the former Labour Prime Minister, Baroness Jay on the left, who's spoken often of the Princess. She worked with her in the black hat there. She worked with her in the AIDS charities and has talked about her work. Ivor Richards, Lord Richards, the leader of the Labour Party in the House of Lords. So there is a wide range of people coming here, and these other charity workers are gathering at the Mall. They're going into the road, Stableyard Road, from which they will emerge later to follow the cortege. They go round the back here, and when they come out, it'll be out of Marlborough Street onto the Mall. Each of the 110 charities that she supported, at one point she cut them back to half a dozen in the last year or so, but each of them has been invited to send 5 representatives here, under the towering statue of Queen Victoria, who looks up the Mall towards Trafalgar Square. And all the time, at a slow pace, drawn by 6 dark bay horses, with the rumble of the wheels and the click of their hooves, this sad procession works its way through London towards the Abbey. And as it goes, on each side, the crowds look and watch. Some take photographs, some pray, some are in tears. All of them come here simply to pay their homage, and thousands others there watching in Hyde Park on the television monitors. the father of Dodi Al-Fayed, Muhammad Al-Fayed, the owner of Harrods, the London store, whose son became a friend. The great procession of charity workers who've been following the cortege ever since halfway down the Mall, and who will now leave it to go separately to St. Margaret's to listen to the service there, as the coffin itself is borne alone, followed by the members of the family, to the west door of the Abbey. Coming down Broad Sanctuary now, the final approach road, in this brilliant sunshine, with these people who've come here 2-3 days ago to stand here and mourn as their princess passes. And as the cortege turns towards the west door of Westminster Abbey, the gun carriage and the guardsmen who will bear the coffin inside, we join Tom Fleming, who is in the Abbey.
On a September day in 1982, I described the scene on the first official visit overseas alone of Diana, Princess of Wales. She was 21, and she was representing Her Majesty the Queen at the funeral of a beautiful and much-loved princess who had died some days before in a tragic car accident, Princess Grace of Monaco. Little did I imagine that 15 years later to the month, I would be watching the arrival of a simple coffin draped with another royal standard, bearing the body of that beautiful and much-loved young princess of our own country, killed 6 days ago in a tragic car accident. The bearer party found by men of the Prince of Wales Company from the 1st Battalion, the Welsh Guards. Will now lift the coffin from the gun carriage. Utter silence in the sanctuary. The coffin surmounted by family flowers. The little prince's wreath to the right. And slowly, the coffin will be raised. To be carried now so gently and with infinite care through the railings heaped with flowers and messages to the great west door of Westminster Abbey. Beyond that door, all now await the beginning of a service which will become, for an hour, the focus of a nation's remarkable outpouring of grief and affection. A service which marks the first and public part of a funeral that will end later this afternoon, quietly and far from the public gaze, in a green corner of Northamptonshire. And behind the coffin, the chief mourners, Prince Philip, Duke of Edinburgh, Earl Spencer, Princess's younger brother, Prince William, her elder son, Prince Harry, will be 13 in 9 days' time, his father, the Prince of Wales. Often received by the Dean of Westminster, the very Reverend Dr. Wesley Carr. Through into this building which has seen so many occasions of history, so many occasions of heartbreaking remembrance. And when the bearer party halt within the west door, the service will begin.